Dr. Sarah Chin spent 20 years helping seniors live healthier. Then, in less than 48 hours, her career was toast. Not for a medical error or patient harm. Her crime? Suggesting masturbation could benefit older adults' health. For that, her life's work was trashed. What unfolded next reveals a twisted truth about how we see sex and aging in this country. It'll make you rethink everything: healthcare, ageism, and the bizarre moral panic still driving medical talk. Ever wondered why we're so terrified of senior sexuality? This story gets wild. Look, I get it. Old people and sex? Makes a lot of us squirm. We're conditioned to think libido vanishes at 65, like it's got an expiration date. But Dr. Chen, a respected geriatrician with decades of experience, knew better. She'd seen how sexual health, or its absence, impacted everything from depression to heart health in her elderly patients. She wasn't trying to shock anyone, she was a top doctor, publishing peer-reviewed work. The whole thing started innocently enough during what should have been a routine medical conference in Phoenix. Dr. Chen was presenting her research on holistic approaches to senior wellness, the kind of boring academic presentation that usually puts half the audience to sleep while they scroll through their phones. She was talking about exercise, nutrition, social engagement, all the standard stuff that everyone already knows helps older adults stay healthy. But then she got to a section of her research that had been bothering her for months, the data showing that seniors who maintain some form of sexual activity, whether with partners or alone, showed significantly better outcomes across multiple health metrics. Subscribe now. What she said next truly shocked everyone. Dr. Chen looked out at this room full of healthcare professionals, people who had presumably gone to medical school and understood human anatomy, and said something that should have been as controversial as recommending daily vitamins. She presented her data showing that regular sexual activity, including masturbation, appeared to correlate with lower rates of depression, better sleep quality, improved cardiovascular function, and even stronger immune responses in elderly patients. She wasn't making wild claims or suggesting that orgasms were some kind of fountain of youth, she was simply presenting scientific evidence that sexual health remains important throughout the entire human lifespan, even when we're talking about people in their 70s, 80s, and beyond. The reaction? Immediate and wild. People gasped. Doctors who handle every bodily function imaginable suddenly looked scandalized just because someone mentioned older people might still have working genitals. The conference moderator tried to cut her off, claiming they were behind schedule, even with 15 minutes left. Comment if you think their reaction was justified. Because this is where it gets truly strange. But the real shitstorm didn't start until someone in the audience started live tweeting her presentation. Within hours, her comments were twisted online, spreading fast. Dr. Chen, the respected geriatrician, became the masturbation doctor, accused of corrupting America's grandparents. Conservative bloggers sensationalized the story, painting her as a deviant pushing inappropriate content. The hospital where she'd worked for over 15 years started getting phone calls and emails from outraged citizens who probably couldn't even spell geriatric but were absolutely certain that Dr. Chen was somehow damaging the moral fiber of society. Board members who had praised her work for years suddenly developed collective amnesia about her contributions to the field. Within a week, the hospital administration called her in. The ultimatum: publicly apologize for inappropriate comments and promise to never discuss senior sexual health again, or lose her job. Let me know in the comments if you think she should have just apologized and moved on, because her decision reveals something crucial about medical censorship. Dr. Chen refused to apologize for presenting scientific evidence, and honestly, good for her. She told the administration that sexual health is a legitimate medical concern for patients of all ages, and that censoring evidence-based research because it makes people uncomfortable is exactly the kind of backwards thinking that keeps patients from getting comprehensive health care. She pointed out that the same hospital regularly treated erectile dysfunction in older male patients without anyone batting an eye, but apparently suggesting that women might also have sexual health needs past menopause was somehow crossing a line. 2 days later, she was fired. Not for incompetence, not for patient complaints, not for any legitimate medical reason. She was terminated for conduct unbecoming of a healthcare professional and making statements inconsistent with the hospital's values. 20 years of exemplary service, hundreds of grateful patients, innovative research that had improved care for thousands of seniors, all of it thrown away because she had the audacity to suggest that sexual health doesn't disappear at retirement age. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because her firing points to something bigger than just a moral panic. Here's where this story takes a turn that's going to make you realize we're not just dealing with prudish administrators having a collective freakout. I started digging into who was really behind the push to get Dr. Chen fired, and it wasn't just angry phone calls from concerned citizens. The hospital where she worked is part of a larger healthcare network that's influenced by organizations that actively work to limit discussions of sexuality in medicine, especially for women and older patients. These aren't just random religious groups clutching their pearls. We're talking about well-funded conservative organizations influencing hospital boards across the country, aiming to control medical conversations around reproductive health, sex ed, and anything else that conflicts with their specific moral views. Dr. Chen's firing wasn't an isolated incident. It aligns with efforts to sanitize healthcare and remove any acknowledgement that human sexuality exists beyond narrow confines. The more I dug, the more similar cases I found: medical professionals disciplined or fired for discussing sexual health in ways conservative board members found uncomfortable. Doctors addressing LGBTQ+ senior needs, researchers studying sexual activities benefits, even nurses discussing elder abuse prevention. Many faced professional consequences for treating sexuality as a legitimate healthcare concern. Drop a comment if you're starting to see the pattern here, because this religious influence in healthcare is way more extensive than you think. But here's the part that's really going to piss you off. While Dr. Chen was being destroyed for suggesting that masturbation might be healthy, these same healthcare networks were actively promoting and profiting from treatments for male sexual dysfunction. Viagra prescriptions for elderly men? Absolutely fine, even encouraged. Testosterone replacement therapy for older guys who want to maintain their sex drives? No problem whatsoever. Expensive surgical procedures to help men achieve erections? Covered by insurance and widely advertised. But the moment someone suggests that women might also have sexual health needs, or that sexual activity doesn't require a penis and a prescription, suddenly we're dealing with inappropriate content and moral concerns. The hypocrisy is so blatant it would be funny if it wasn't destroying careers and denying patients access to comprehensive healthcare. We live in a society where a 70-year-old man can get insurance coverage for penis pumps and erection injections, but a respected doctor can't even mention that orgasms might have health benefits without losing her job. Dr. Chen tried to fight back through the proper channels, filing appeals and complaints with medical licensing boards, professional organizations, and civil rights groups. But she quickly discovered that the system is rigged against anyone who challenges the conservative orthodoxy that has infected healthcare administration. Medical boards that are supposed to protect physicians from political interference were dominated by the same religious conservative influences that had gotten her fired in the first place. Let me know in the comments if you think she had any real chance of winning this fight, because what happened next shows just how deep this corruption goes. The professional retaliation didn't stop with her firing. Word spread quickly through the medical community that Dr. Chen was a troublemaker who had been terminated for inappropriate conduct. Other hospitals wouldn't touch her, not because of her qualifications or patient care record, but because hiring her would mean dealing with the same religious pressure groups that had destroyed her previous position. Insurance companies started questioning her malpractice coverage, medical journals began rejecting her research submissions, and speaking engagements that had been booked months in advance were suddenly cancelled without explanation. She went from being one of the most respected geriatricians in her region to being essentially blacklisted from the medical profession, all for presenting scientific evidence that challenged puritanical attitudes about aging and sexuality. The message was clear: step out of line on issues related to sexual health, especially when it comes to women or elderly patients, and we'll make sure you never work in medicine again. Meanwhile, the patients who had benefited from her comprehensive approach to senior health were left wondering why their doctor had suddenly disappeared. Many of them had never received such thorough, compassionate care, and they couldn't understand why someone who had helped them so much was no longer allowed to practice medicine. The hospital replaced her with a physician who focuses strictly on traditional geriatric issues, medication management, fall prevention, chronic disease treatment, but carefully avoids any discussion of the psychological, social, or sexual factors that contribute to overall wellness in elderly patients. Hit subscribe if you want to see how this story ends, because Dr. Chen's response is going to restore your faith in human decency. After months of fighting a system designed to crush anyone who challenges its moral authoritarianism, Dr. Chen made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of continuing to bang her head against the wall of medical bureaucracy, she decided to take her message directly to the people who needed to hear it most. She started a podcast called The Whole Truth About Aging, where she discusses all the topics that hospital administrators and insurance companies don't want seniors to hear about. Her episodes cover everything from the importance of sexual health and maintaining overall wellness to the ways that ageism in healthcare prevents elderly patients from receiving comprehensive care. She interviews other medical professionals who have been censured for challenging conservative orthodoxy, researchers whose work has been suppressed for political reasons, and seniors who have been denied proper healthcare because their needs didn't fit into narrow moral categories. The podcast has exploded in popularity, especially among older adults who are hungry for honest, science-based information about aging that doesn't treat them like sexless children who can't handle adult conversations about their own bodies. Dr. Chen receives hundreds of messages from seniors thanking her for treating them like complete human beings instead of just collections of medical problems to be managed until death. She's also started consulting with progressive healthcare organizations and senior living facilities that want to provide truly comprehensive care to their residents and patients. Her approach focuses on treating the whole person, including their emotional, social, and yes, sexual needs, rather than just managing their decline until they die. The demand for her services has been overwhelming, proving that there's a huge market for healthcare providers who aren't afraid to acknowledge that humans remain human throughout their entire lives. Comment below if you think Dr. Chen made the right choice by leaving traditional medicine, because her success story reveals something important about the future of healthcare. But here's the twist that's going to make you see this whole story in a completely different light. Dr. Chen's firing and subsequent success have exposed a massive generational divide in healthcare that nobody wants to talk about. The people trying to silence discussions of senior sexuality aren't actually the seniors themselves. They're younger family members, middle-aged hospital administrators, and religious conservatives who are projecting their own discomfort with aging onto the people they claim to be protecting. The elderly patients Dr. Chen worked with were overwhelmingly grateful for someone who treated their sexual health as a legitimate medical concern. They wanted information about maintaining intimacy with partners, dealing with age-related changes in sexual function, and yes, understanding that masturbation could be part of a healthy lifestyle even in their 70s and 80s. It wasn't the seniors who were scandalized by these conversations, it was their adult children and the healthcare bureaucrats who couldn't handle the idea that mom and dad might still be sexual beings. This disconnect reveals something profound about how we think about aging in America. We've created a culture where growing old means becoming progressively more infantilized, where seniors are expected to gracefully surrender their agency, their desires, and their complexity as human beings in exchange for being treated like beloved pets who need constant supervision. The idea that elderly people might still have sexual needs, might still want information about their bodies, might still be complete human beings with the full range of human experiences, is apparently so threatening that we're willing to destroy medical careers to suppress it. Let me know in the comments if you've seen this kind of ageism in your own family, because this pattern is everywhere once you start looking for it. Dr. Chen's story isn't really about masturbation or sexual health, it's about the fundamental question of whether we're going to treat elderly people as human beings deserving of complete, compassionate healthcare, or whether we're going to continue infantilizing them to make ourselves more comfortable with our own mortality. Every time we refuse to acknowledge that seniors have complex emotional, social, and sexual lives, we're essentially telling them that their humanity expires at some arbitrary age determined by people who are terrified of growing old themselves. The medical establishment's reaction to her research reveals how deeply embedded ageism and sexism are in our healthcare system. Male sexuality is treated as a legitimate medical concern worthy of expensive treatments and insurance coverage, but female sexuality, especially in older women, is seen as either irrelevant or inappropriate to discuss. The message is clear: men deserve to maintain their sexual function as they age, but women should just accept that their sexual lives are over once they're past childbearing age. This double standard doesn't just affect healthcare, it influences how we think about aging, relationships, and what it means to live a full life as we get older. By firing Dr. Chen for suggesting that sexual health remains important throughout the lifespan, the medical establishment sent a message that certain aspects of human experience are too shameful or inappropriate to acknowledge, even in a medical context. Subscribe if you think this kind of medical censorship is happening in other areas too, because Dr. Chen's case is just the tip of the iceberg. What's really infuriating is that Dr. Chen's original research wasn't even controversial from a scientific standpoint. Multiple studies have shown correlations between sexual activity and improved health outcomes in elderly populations. Regular orgasms can help with everything from stress reduction to immune function to cardiovascular health. The idea that masturbation might be beneficial for seniors isn't some fringe theory, it's supported by legitimate research that has been published in peer-reviewed medical journals. But we live in a culture where scientific evidence takes a backseat to moral panic, where religious ideology gets to override medical expertise, and where healthcare decisions are made by people more concerned with their own comfort levels than with patient welfare. Dr. Chen's firing represents everything that's wrong with American healthcare: the influence of religious extremism, the prevalence of ageism and sexism, and the prioritization of political correctness over patient care. The fact that she's been more successful outside the traditional medical system than she ever was within it tells us something important about where healthcare is headed. Patients are increasingly looking for providers who will treat them as complete human beings rather than just collections of symptoms to be managed. They want honest conversations about all aspects of health and aging, not sanitized discussions that avoid anything that might make administrators uncomfortable. Dr. Chen's podcast and consulting work represent a new model of healthcare that prioritizes patient autonomy, comprehensive wellness, and evidence-based medicine over institutional politics and moral authoritarianism. Her success suggests that there's a growing market for healthcare providers who aren't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and address the full range of human experience, even when it makes people uncomfortable. Comment below if you think more doctors should be taking this independent approach, because the implications go way beyond sexual health. The broader lesson from Dr. Chen's story is that institutional healthcare is failing patients by prioritizing the comfort of administrators over the needs of the people they're supposed to serve. When medical professionals can be fired for presenting scientific evidence that challenges conservative sensibilities, we've created a system where ideology trumps expertise and political considerations override patient welfare. This isn't just about one doctor or one research presentation, it's about the systematic suppression of medical information that doesn't conform to narrow moral standards set by people who have never treated a patient in their lives. Dr. Chen's case exposes how religious conservative groups have influenced healthcare administration and are using their influence to control medical discourse, censor research, and punish providers who refuse to limit their practice to politically acceptable topics. The fact that she's thriving outside the traditional system while continuing to help seniors live healthier, more complete lives proves that the problem isn't with her approach, it's with an institutional culture that values conformity over excellence and moral authoritarianism over medical ethics. Her success story offers hope that patients can find the comprehensive, honest healthcare they deserve, even if they have to look outside traditional channels to get it. If you think Dr. Chen's story represents a larger problem with healthcare censorship, make sure you're subscribed because this is just one example of how medical professionals are being silenced for challenging conservative orthodoxy. What bothers me most about this whole situation is that while Dr. Chen was being professionally destroyed for suggesting that masturbation might be healthy, the same healthcare system was actively profiting from the sexual dysfunction and dissatisfaction of elderly patients. Instead of addressing sexual health proactively and comprehensively, hospitals and insurance companies prefer to wait until problems become severe enough to require expensive interventions, then charge patients premium rates for treatments that could have been prevented with better education and more holistic care. Dr. Chen's approach of discussing sexual health as part of overall wellness could have prevented countless cases of depression, relationship problems, and physical health issues in elderly patients. But apparently, it's more profitable to let seniors suffer in silence until their problems become severe enough to require costly medical treatments than to have honest conversations about maintaining sexual health throughout the lifespan. The irony is that by firing her for being too progressive and comprehensive in her approach to senior care, the medical establishment has actually created a more radical and influential voice for healthcare reform. Dr. Chen's podcast reaches more people than her clinical practice ever did, and her message about treating elderly patients as complete human beings is spreading far beyond the geriatric medicine community. Her story has become a rallying cry for healthcare providers who are tired of having their practice limited by political considerations and moral authoritarianism. Medical professionals across the country are starting to speak out about the ways that conservative ideology is interfering with patient care, and Dr. Chen's case has become a symbol of the need for healthcare reform that prioritizes evidence over ideology. Drop a comment if you think Dr. Chen's firing was actually the best thing that could have happened for healthcare reform, because her influence is now way bigger than it ever would have been. Looking back at this whole nightmare, I think Dr. Chen got the last laugh. She went from being one geriatrician in one hospital to being a nationally recognized advocate for comprehensive senior care. Her podcast has hundreds of thousands of listeners, her consulting practice is booked solid, and she's become a sought-after speaker at progressive healthcare conferences across the country. Meanwhile, the hospital that fired her is still dealing with the fallout from their decision. They've lost one of their most respected physicians, alienated progressive staff members who saw how Dr. Chen was treated, and gained a reputation as a place where religious ideology trumps medical expertise. Recruiting top-quality physicians has become more difficult because word has spread that the administration doesn't support providers who take comprehensive approaches to patient care. The broader healthcare system is slowly starting to recognize that Dr. Chen was ahead of her time in understanding what patients actually want from their healthcare providers. Seniors don't want to be treated like children who can't handle adult conversations about their own bodies. They want providers who see them as complete human beings with complex needs that extend beyond just managing chronic diseases until death. Dr. Chen's success outside the traditional system has proven that there's a huge market for healthcare providers who aren't afraid to address the full range of human experience, even when it makes administrators uncomfortable. Her approach of treating sexual health as part of overall wellness is becoming more accepted as patients demand more comprehensive care and providers realize that ignoring major aspects of human health doesn't make them go away. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to see how this story continues to unfold, because Dr. Chen's influence on healthcare reform is just getting started. The most important thing to understand about Dr. Chen's story is that it's not really about masturbation or senior sexuality, it's about the fundamental question of whether healthcare is going to be controlled by evidence or ideology, by patient needs or administrator comfort levels, by medical expertise or political considerations. Her firing represents everything that's wrong with American healthcare, but her subsequent success offers hope that change is possible. She's proven that patients are hungry for honest, comprehensive healthcare that treats them as complete human beings rather than just collections of symptoms to be managed. Her podcast's popularity demonstrates that there's a massive audience for medical information that doesn't talk down to people or avoid uncomfortable topics out of misplaced moral concern. Most importantly, Dr. Chen's story shows that healthcare providers don't have to accept institutional censorship and political interference in their practice. There are alternatives to the traditional system, and patients are increasingly willing to seek out providers who prioritize comprehensive care over political correctness. Her journey from respected hospital physician to healthcare reform advocate illustrates how institutional failures can sometimes create opportunities for positive change. By firing her for presenting evidence-based research, the medical establishment inadvertently created a more powerful voice for healthcare reform than they ever could have imagined. Comment below with your thoughts on whether Dr. Chen's story gives you hope or makes you more worried about the state of healthcare, because her experience reveals both the problems and the potential solutions in American medicine. And if you're wondering whether Dr. Chen has any regrets about the path that led her from prestigious hospital physician to independent healthcare advocate, she's been pretty clear about her answer. In a recent podcast episode, she said that losing her job was the best thing that ever happened to her career because it forced her to find ways to reach patients who really needed her message, rather than just the ones who could afford to see her in an expensive hospital setting. She's helping more seniors live healthier, more complete lives than she ever did within the traditional medical system, and she's doing it without having to worry about whether her approach to patient care meets the approval of religious conservative board members who have never treated a patient in their lives. That's what real healthcare reform looks like, and Dr. Chen's story proves that it's possible, even when the institutional deck is stacked against providers who refuse to compromise their medical ethics for political expediency. The woman who lost her job for suggesting that masturbation might help seniors stay healthy has become one of the most influential voices in geriatric medicine, and that irony tells us everything we need to know about what's wrong with healthcare in America and what's possible when medical professionals refuse to be silenced by moral authoritarianism.